One of the most common questions I get asked by people who want to improve their iPhone photography is which camera settings are the best. Well, today I'm going to be going through all of the camera settings on the iPhone and advising you which ones to use in which situations. Now, I want to preface this by saying that this is an iPhone 15 Pro Max that I am using, so you may not see the exact same settings that I have. If you don't see the same settings, then don't worry about it. Just adjust the ones that you do have. So let's jump into the settings. So tap settings and then scroll down to camera, which is there. And here are the camera settings. So these four are the video settings. I'm not really concerned with those in iPhone Photo Academy. I'm going to start with formats. So we're going to formats, and under camera capture, you can see high efficiency and most compatible. And Apple gives you this nice little description here as to what is going on. So most compatible is the traditional JPEG. You've likely heard of the good old-fashioned JPEG. It's an old file format, it's high quality, but it's not as efficient as the high efficiency. And this means that you get about the same image quality, but at a lower file size. So I choose high efficiency. High efficiency is also more flexible as well, meaning you can do more things with it, like store a video as part of the same file. So I recommend sticking with high efficiency in all situations, unless you're working with someone who uses an older device, maybe you're trying to send photos to them and their device can't handle the newer file format. So in that case, choose most compatible. Now let's go down to photo capture. And this is a setting that you may not see on your device, because when I'm in the 1x camera, I get the option to shoot at 24 megapixels. Now this only applies to the 1x camera, the 0.5x lens, the ultra wide lens, and the telephoto lens don't get the option to shoot 24 megapixels. This is just the main camera. And I'm going to recommend you don't get that much of a bigger file, according to Apple here. You can see underneath this description. So there is no reason to not stick with 24 megapixels. You have higher resolution photos, better for printing and zooming in later. So stick with 24 megapixels. Up next, we have one of this iPhone's most powerful camera features, which is ProRAW and resolution control. And it's one of the most powerful camera features of this iPhone for a couple of reasons. The first one is that it allows you to shoot up to 48 megapixels. And I say up to 48 because that's only available on the 1x lens. None of the other digital lenses or the physical optical lenses can shoot 48 megapixels. So just keep that in mind. And the next reason it's one of the most powerful camera features of this iPhone is ProRAW. Now, ProRAW is another image file format. Similar to the other two, it looks practically the same, except it contains a lot more data, which is brilliant for editing your photos later. So if you want to get the most from your iPhone's camera sensor and edit your photos, then I recommend shooting in ProRAW. Just keep in mind that the files are significantly larger. So let's turn on ProRAW and resolution control, and you'll see under it, we have this Pro default option here, but more on that in just a moment. For now, we're going to head into the iPhone's camera app, where you'll see this RAW 48 has now appeared at the top left corner. And when we tap it, we are now in ProRAW at 48 megapixels. I'm just going to run you quickly through the different resolutions of the different lenses, because as I mentioned before, even though it says max, the maximum resolution of these different cameras are not the same. So 1x lens in its fullest form is 48 megapixels. But if I tap it to go to the 1.2, it's now 35 megapixels. 1.5, it's now 24 megapixels. The 2x lens is 12 megapixels at its maximum resolution. The 0.5, the ultra wide, is also 12, and so is the 5x telephoto. So those are all your maximum resolutions, but there is more, because if I tap and hold on RAW, I get some more formats and resolution options. And we can decipher what they are based on what their name is, based on what we now know about how they work. So we have RAW 48, as I've already explained, then HEIC 24, which means high efficiency image container 24 megapixels. We've got RAW 12, which is ProRAW at 12 megapixels, because 48 megapixels isn't always appropriate, it's not always what you want. And then we can go back to 48 megapixels. And just notice that if I tap on HEIC, Live Photos comes on. Turn on RAW, Live Photos goes off, because you can't have both at the same time. You can't have any of the Pro formats and Live Photos at the same time. Now, back in the menu. When shooting ProRAW, you can choose how files are saved. JPEG, most compatible, is easiest to share but loses detail. JPEG XL lossless keeps every detail but is slightly larger. Best for editing, printing, or top quality. And JPEG XL lossy is a middle ground. Smallest size but less universal. My advice, use JPEG for sharing and JPEG XL lossless when quality matters the most. Underneath ProRAW and resolution control, we have some video capture settings for Apple ProRes. And I have to say, again, this is iPhone Photo Academy, so I'm not concerned with those settings in this course. So I'm going to go back and into the main camera settings, and underneath formats, you'll see preserve settings. And what this means is this is going to save the state that the camera was in when you last had it open. For example, you can save the last camera mode you used, as opposed to it resetting back to the default, which is the photo mode. If you adjust your exposure, say down to -1, then you don't want it to reset when you reopen the camera, you can check this. Now, there's no recommendation from me here, it's really down to personal preference. I've been shooting with iPhone for a long time, and I've never actually changed any of these settings. It doesn't make a difference to the way I shoot, and it might not to you. It's all down to personal preference. Now, the next setting that concerns us is the volume up for burst, and this allows you to hold the volume up button to take a burst of photos, and that's a rapid capture of photos, just like this. So now if I hold the volume up button, I get a burst of photos. Whereas if I turn this setting off, I'm going to get a video instead. Now, again, this is personal preference, how you like to shoot. Now, next are the composition settings. And I think these are my personal favorite settings, because these are all about how you compose your photos. And in photography, composition just describes how things are arranged in the frame. Now, composition is extremely important for when you want to improve your iPhone photography. In my opinion, much more important than camera settings. And module 3 of this course is all about composition and mindset. I highly recommend you stick around and watch it. But for now, we have some composition settings to help you compose when you get to that part of the course. So the first one is the grid. Now, you may have heard of this grid. It's the rule of thirds grid. So if I turn it on, a grid will appear on my screen in the form of the rule of thirds. Rule of thirds divides the scene up into thirds. So I have this top third, the middle third, and the bottom third here. And I also have thirds along the vertical part of the frame as well. I can put elements of interest on these intersecting points. For example, I have this castle turret here on this third, I've got this other castle turret on this third, and then I have this line of the wall leading to the point. So that is a basic little technique for composition using the grid. So I'll go back into the camera settings, and next I can turn on the level. And just as its name suggests, this will make a level appear. So when I'm composing, if I tilt the phone like this, you can see it goes yellow when the frame is level, and it doesn't distract you too much because it does disappear once it has fulfilled its purpose. And again, this is a preference, having the level. If you do landscapes, then it's probably a good idea to have it on. I keep the grid on all the time. I can find the level a bit distracting. I personally like to do portrait photos where I rarely need the level. But if I was doing more landscapes, then I would have the level on. Next, we have a bit of an unusual setting. This is another personal preference. This is mirror the front camera. So I'm going to turn to the camera app, tap this circle button here and come into the selfie camera. Hello, everybody. So now when I take a selfie, watch the position of this logo here and the position of the background. Excuse me. So let me smile for you. And now when I review the selfie, it looks just like I just saw it. Well, for me, I don't like how my face looks here because it's mirrored, it's flipped around and people aren't symmetrical. So when I turn this off, come back into the camera, it's still mirrored. So if I take another one, now when I look at it, it's not been mirrored. This is how I prefer my face to look, and you'll have your own personal preference. And finally, we have the view outside of the frame. So when I take a picture of this castle again, if I turn this on, you will see, and go out of the selfie camera, you'll see I can now see bits of extra frame. This is a preview of what's going to happen if I was to come into the ultra-wide camera. Same with the telephoto. I now get a preview of what's going to happen if I was to zoom out. Again, this is a personal preference. I never have this on. It doesn't, for me, serve any purpose. It could give you a hint as to what you're missing out on if you were to zoom out a little bit, but I just find it a little bit distracting. So I prefer to have it off. And those are your composition settings. Above the composition settings at the top, we have the photographic styles setting. And this allows you to add a photographic style before you launch the camera, as opposed to choosing one while you're in the camera. I much prefer choosing a photographic style when I'm already in the camera, because I can see what it's going to look like. I don't know what style I want applied to my photo before I can actually see what I'm taking a photo of. Now, just keep in mind, we now have the Pro formats in operation, and photographic styles will disappear from the hidden menu if you're in a Pro format. Whereas if I turn off my Pro format, photographic styles will appear. And Rich Warm is looking good. Underneath the composition settings, you'll see we have some customization options for the main camera. So if you've had a play with the main camera, then this should be a little bit more familiar to you now. We have the default lens, and we also have which additional lenses are available. So if you find you never use the 28mm lens, for example, you can remove it. So now when I come into the camera, the 1.2 lens is now no longer available. You can also turn these off completely. Or if you never use them, then just don't tap 1x lens and it'll do the same thing as turning these lenses off. But if you find you always use one of these lenses, then you can default to it. So if I want to default to 1.5, then my new default when I switch back to the main camera is now 1.5. But I like to get the maximum resolution I can, so I'm going to keep my default at 1x. Underneath that, we have the Portraits in Photo Mode feature. This is another one of my favorite camera features of the iPhone 15 Pro Max. And let me just show you what this does. So if I come into the camera, now with RAW turned on, because Portrait is an artificial blur which is applied using the phone's processing, nothing will happen because I have one of my Pro formats turned on. But when I turn my Pro format off, now when I tap to focus on an object or a person or a dog or a cat, something like that, this little F appears. Now, people work best, or you'll see more of portraits in the portraits episode of this course. For now, I'm going to use this contraption. So if I tap to focus on it and tap this F, it's going to intelligently, can you see over here, blur the background out. So it's applying a portrait effect live in the photo. That is actually similar to how portrait mode itself works. What I can do with that photo is I can view it and then turn the portrait off. So it's a really flexible way of taking portrait photos, and you're not locked into the portrait mode after you've taken the photo. You can pick and choose. Next, we have prioritize faster shooting. So I have this off all the time personally, because what the iPhone will do is when you're rapidly tapping the shutter, so let me just take a different shot here. It's going to intelligently adapt the shooting speed. So what it's doing, every time you tap the shutter, there's a lot of processing going on behind the scenes. And you can reduce some of that processing and focus on capturing an image faster, because that processing takes time. So if I turn this setting on, and now I rapidly press the shutter, the images capture a lot faster. Personally, I like to get the most possible from my iPhone's camera, so I keep this setting turned off. Up next, we have lens correction. Now, lens correction corrects distortion on the front-facing camera and the ultra-wide camera. So if you see the frame looking warped, if you see straight lines that aren't straight, they're actually bent, because that's how these cameras work. They warp the frame to achieve their effects. And if you find that they get warped too much, you can correct that with lens correction. And finally, the last camera setting I want to show you is the macro control setting. And this gives you some control over the macro capability of the iPhone. So I'm going to come into the camera app, and when I raise my macro prop up to the lens, you'll see this little flower icon appears in the corner. And this lets me turn off the macro mode because it automatically activates when you bring something close enough to the camera. So if I bring it away, the camera switches, and I bring it back, we switch back into macro mode. And if I don't want that to happen, then I can turn it off by tapping that flower. And now, no matter what happens, the iPhone won't switch to macro mode. But I can remove that control by turning off this macro control setting. Now, the camera's still going to switch to macro, but I don't have the option to turn it off, which I find extremely useful. I don't see any reason why I'd want to have this setting off. I always have it turned on. And those are the iPhone's camera settings, at least the settings that I have on the 15 Pro Max. And again, if you don't see the same settings, don't worry about it. It's much more important that you learn composition. But settings are still important. Keep in mind though that there's no right or wrong strictly. It's what you want, what you prefer, and what the situation requires. For example, if you want to take a photo at the maximum resolution, get the most out of your camera because you want to print high resolution and crop in, then ProRAW 48 might make sense for you. If you want to just take a snap, send to a friend, then it really doesn't make sense, and a live photo will be much more appropriate. So keep that in mind, have a play, see what works for you, get familiar with it so that when myself or another instructor further on refers to a setting or uses it, you'll know where it is and how to access it. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
This video was a free preview of my iPhone Photo Academy online course. In this course, you'll discover everything you need to know to take stunning photos with your iPhone. So if you'd like to take the kind of photos that will leave your friends and family speechless, please take a look at the full version of iPhone Photo Academy. You'll find a link in the description right next to this video. So click on that link right now, and I'll see you inside the full version of the course.